When was the last time we did a show, just the two of us? I feel like it's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. It's been, I don't know, it feels like over a month.
It has. I also have realized too, this new thing I've been doing towards the end. I've done so many shows now that I just don't even do introductions. I just want to start talking. I just can't even bring myself to asking you how you're doing. How are you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing good. Yeah, that used to be kind of your thing. You were like excellent at kind of the blocking and tackling of hosting a show, and now you're just like, hey man, yeah, it's been a while, huh?
No, that's the stuff I'm trying not to do. I'm trying to get right into the good stuff. Like I should just come on and be like, who's the 2021 league winner, Pat?
I guess. I don't know. I think people are used to a certain cadence.
Yeah, I got to balance my range here a little bit. So yeah, I mean, we don't have Gretch with us tonight. We this is the first time we've done a show, just the two of us in a while. But Gretch will be back on Friday with Pat for Chasing Signals. We're gonna have 2 shows next week, I believe, on the FFPC Playoff Challenge. Those are something that Pat and I look forward to each year. Pat, you gonna be building ownership projections again this year?
Yeah, I think I am. I'm going on Tuesday. I'm doing a show with Leone. I think Levitan's going to be on there, and so I'm a little bit like I gotta put in the work if I'm going to do ownership projections and then talk to Levitan. He's the ownership projection whiz. So
he's just going to. Levitan, you're going to talk about trying to galaxy brain some thin plays and be like, no, dude, just play the best plays. You don't have to worry about it. Make our opponents make the mistakes and we just jam the nuts, dude.
See, I think we should get Adam Levitan and Blair Andrews to co on a team because that really would just be like two worlds colliding. Could you imagine? Blair pitching MVS to Levitan in the PC playoff challenge?
Yeah. I mean, even listening to like Silva and Adam do their drafts, like, they had different styles because I feel like Adam in his season long drafts, he was pretty on board with kind of the structural strategies of loading up on wide receivers there and not messing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so tonight what we wanted to do is take this opportunity to, it was actually Eric Belair, friend of the show. He's in the chat here. I can pull up what he had sent to me, but he had said, were you and Pat going to do any post-mortem for ship chasing? I think it'd be great to hear what worked, what didn't, what you may have done differently in the draft or in using Fab. As someone who's thinking of dipping their toe into the mid-stakes season-long water, I'd love to hear this stuff. And I know that was something, throughout the year that was maybe lost a little bit, more focus on our teams as we did more stuff with friends of the ship chasing universe. So yeah, I think we can go through it tonight now that we have the full season in our rearview mirror and kind of maybe hit on some of the big things that we did right, that we want to do differently and all of that jazz.
Yeah, sounds great.
I figure we should start, with the team that we drafted first. And this was kind of a debate for us because heading into this year, we had only ever drafted our main event teams in Vegas, right before the season was about to start. This year we did the slow main back at the start of July. And even talking with Sean, I remember in the off season, he was kind of conflicted on if it was optimal to draft that early. We felt pretty strongly that there was an edge in doing so. And based on our success with that team, I'm very interested in doing multiple early slow draft teams again next year. I don't know if you feel similarly about that.
Yeah, I think it's good to sort of space it out. I think the early and the late both offer advantages. I think the advantage of the early is that you probably, if you are really into, if you're doing a ton of research in the offseason and you're really into like the rookie profiles and you're more into like projecting things that are uncertain, and you've got like a structural strategy, and you're not just kind of, you're more comfortable in an environment where things aren't quite as known, then you're going to have a pretty big advantage on your league mates. But you might not have as big of an advantage once we get down to the championship playoffs, because I think because everyone else had more information a little bit later in the season, they might be able to put together a mega team a little bit more easily than you did back in, mid-July. So I think that's kind of the pros and cons to it. I think the sweet spot is probably earlier than the Saturday before the first Sunday of football like we used to draft, but I'm not sure it's quite as early as we drafted our first team.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about, being able to build a better like $500,000 contender later in the year. And our buddy Chris G, who's always in the ship chasing Twitter chats, he posted the draft board of the guy who won the main event. And I should have his name here. It is let's see here. It's Philip Hooten, his second time winning the main event, and he drafted that team in Vegas over that weekend with Chris, which would lend credence to your theory too of being able to build more of a monster, late in the season. Although looking at his roster, it was a Myles Gaskin waiver ad that was actually kind of really the difference maker,
and Herbert too,
and Herbert. So that's another interesting thing too of like, some of those guys, I guess the James Robinsons might have been someone we would never have had access to James Robinson in early July.
Well, you do get that first waiver wire run.
Yeah.
So I wonder if like the sweet spot might be a league that's late enough where you get more information, but it's still early enough where you still get the first waiver wire run. So, you know what I mean? Like that, I think that first waiver wire run does give you an advantage if you're willing to be aggressive in that waiver. Because I think we'll get to this, but I think we kind of remind ourselves every year about waivers, but being aggressive early when you don't feel comfortable yet it's just a huge advantage.
Wait, is this the main event champ here, Philip?
We're graced with Philip Hooten. I love it.
Philip, I didn't even know. Were your ears burning? I think this is the first time I've seen your name in the chat. You were just summoned out of nowhere. Congratulations, dude.
Yeah, congrats,
absolutely
man.
Incredible accomplishment. Very, very sick, dude. Well deserved. And yeah, we'd love to have you on the show sometime and talk strategy. So definitely be in contact with us. I started following you on Twitter too, so maybe we can exchange DMs and get you on the program sometime. We'd love to chat with the main event champ. Unless that's just some okay. I was about to say yeah, because we get people making YouTube accounts to comment, so we got to protect ourselves a little bit against that.
Yeah, it's like Cooper hasn't commented in a while. He's got to change
but I do think with this early slow draft main, when you look at it here, I do attribute most of the success to just more the structure, because when you go through this, it's not like we had any massive hits, like anywhere through the draft. I mean, like Hawkinson down the stretch was big for us. Alvin Kamara, obviously, but you paid a premium for him. Like, what do you think about this team? Because if you would have just showed me this draft and said, how do you think the team out of the 5-hole did? I would have been like, I don't know, 5th or 6th in the league. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the 7th round probably locked it up for us there. No, I think I agree with you, obviously. I think the structure was really helpful. We also added Justin Herbert in this league. We've talked about this before, but we really like to go one quarterback. And I think the advantage of going one quarterback, one, you get another lottery ticket pick later in the draft. Jerick McKinnon here helped us out, the 16th round pick. Like, we started him a few times. Just getting a guy like that can be really helpful to get you through some of the bye weeks. And that quarterback that you might add, not only is it probably not add too much value to your team, it might actually subtract value if it makes you feel too comfortable to go after a quarterback who opens up on the waivers with a higher ceiling. And so the fact that we knew we didn't have any condoms with Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz came out and it was pretty clear, it only took a week or two to go, this isn't the guy. And we jumped on Herbert.
And that was a leak in our games that we plugged, because our first few years we would punt quarterback. So, like, using just a random example here, Pat, say we had waited and say we double tapped Joe Burrow and Ben Roethlisberger, in like the 15th, 16th round, getting our QBs late. We probably do not go after Herbert in that stance because we're like, hey, we're fine. We got 2 healthy guys. They're going to be fine. We don't need to do this. But taking that crack, trying to get the ceiling of the Carson Wentz there allowed us to move along quickly. And that's where I think it goes back to the structure being right and helping to point us in the right direction.
Yeah. And we have, I mean, obviously you look here in the 5th round, we took Cortland Sutton over DK Metcalf. You know, there's some spots that we would have really liked to have back. We took Jalen Reagor in the 10th. Justin Jefferson goes in the 11th. So there's like individual things that we screwed up for sure. But the structure, I think, really helped save us. And, you know, Mark Andrews wasn't exactly what we wanted him to be, but I don't really regret taking him in the 2nd round this year. Like, and in fact, he's someone that profiles as, you know, a player I'm going to want to be aggressive on next year too. So it's like one of those picks where, yeah, he didn't crush, and he probably was worth more like, you know, a mid 3rd or an early 4th in terms of actual like capital that he provided. But I think he was fine. Like, he kept us off some other bigger misses in that range. And he also helps out with the structure of having that tight end that you feel really good about starting for most weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a good point of Mark Andrews. You know, he wasn't a league winner at a 2nd round cost, but the combination of the tight end premium, of avoiding some of the other landmines, and just with how gross tight end was, he still gave us a leg up on the competition during those spike weeks, you know, because he did have a few of those spike weeks that really, I mean, when Mark Andrews has the, you know, 80-yard, 2-touchdown game, like, you're winning your week. So yeah. I don't have too many regrets about that. And we don't even have to stare at like, oh man, what if we passed on, you know, DeAndre Hopkins for Mark Andrews in this draft? You know, DeAndre Hopkins goes before.
Right. Yeah. This was, I mean, we also didn't have to pass on like Devontae Adams, you know, so there's nothing too crazy that we did.
And I feel
it's the Cortland Sutton DK Metcalf one that's gonna, you know, that one hurts.
That one hurts. And, you know, you and Leone have talked about this concept of diversification. And the thing is, you know, we ended up playing in 3 main events, 2 of our own, one that was co-managed with Crack Rock. Like, that's not even like a big enough portfolio to even really start thinking about diversification that much. Like, I have no problem going all in on your favorite guys in 2 to 3 drafts. I feel like it's when it's getting over that where you start to think about it more. But I don't have too many regrets, even about like the Cortland Sutton thing from, you know, a process standpoint in 2 drafts, you know, going all in on him.
Yeah, I think the Cortland Sutton one feels fine to me. And God, he got so much opportunity in the one game that he played. Like, it did feel like, and you see Jerry Jeudy getting massive opportunity this season, not doing much with it. So Cortland Sutton just feels like, you know, what could have been was really massive, and then DK Metcalf's fallen off here at the end of the season. So I feel like process-wise, how are we supposed to know that he's going to tear his knee up tackling a guy on an interception? Like, it's just bad luck. The one that, you know, I think is worse is Jalen Reagor, not just because, you know, it was kind of a 50-50 shot and I went really hard on Jalen Reagor instead of Justin Jefferson, but also because Jalen Reagor eventually got priced up, and then he also had the injury concern. So there were multiple times where you could have gone back to your prior and said, you know, I've got like articles on ETR where if you read the article, you're like, well, this guy's like really high on both of these guys. I've got dynasty drafts where I've, you know, took them back to back. Like, I clearly valued them pretty similarly. And yet through like drafting, it makes like, process of drafting makes you more excited about the players that you drafted. So you have to fight against an urge then not to double down later on. And so next year I want to just be careful of like when the price changes in a meaningful way, and there might be some red flags that open up, just looking at guys who a month ago you thought were pretty similar bets, who might even be cheaper and like, you know, might not have, whether it's health red flags or quarterback red flags, whatever the case may be, that you can just kind of move over to.
Yeah. And I feel like the concept of it actually is analogous to DFS stuff too, right? Where on a main slate, you can be contrarian and get in similar amounts of projected points where the field is all concentrating on one play or one wide receiver because maybe he projects slightly better. And so in our case here, it was like, okay, Reagor for us projected slightly better to Justin Jefferson. And so we were just hammering that. But knowing like, hey, you could pivot off of that sacrifice a little bit, whether for diversification or to, offset risk and all of that stuff. So I do think that's a really good point to take into consideration and pull back. But it is also hard. Like when we're doing our first draft in July, I mean, we're going to draft our favorite guys when they're there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's one of the advantages of drafting early is that you can just go after your favorite guys. And if you feel like you do have an advantage in identifying if you really feel like in a vacuum, if everything kind of breaks right and there's no awful injuries and all the crazy chaos that will happen, but somehow you avoid that. If you feel like you really do have an advantage on, picking those guys early, then those early drafts are like, they're the best because then you can actually just pick your best guys. You're not diversifying off anything. You're not saying, well, this guy was cheaper a month ago and now I'm paying a premium. This is one of the first drafts. So you kind of get, I think we'll definitely want to do one of the early drafts every single year. That was really fun. But then when you were able to get those guys, making sure that if the price changes and like you're saying, like you've now got a guy, the similar to DFS where you've got a guy, you might have him projected slightly higher than someone else, but now the ownership is condensing on Jalen Reagor and let's say CeeDee Lamb, and Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, they were much cheaper, T. Higgins. So you could go, okay, well, yes, I don't think these guys are quite as good at bets, but they're so much cheaper. I'd rather try to get two of them later on. And I already have exposure to the guy I like most from my early draft.
Yeah. And I do think when we talk about like heading into next season and in the biggest leaks we want to plug up, and I do think it is that diversification concept. And I think one of our big strides we made this year, and we mentioned it with Justin Herbert, and I'm pulling up obviously our end roster here that we rolled out in week 16 in the championship contest. You'll also see T. Higgins there. And T. Higgins is probably a guy in years past that we wouldn't have had on our teams because we would have said, hey, we're loaded at wide receiver. We don't need to make a move for this guy. And that was something we made a concerted effort this year is to move quickly on these guys that flash. Just take a peek, just get them on your roster. You can cut bait if they're a flash in the pan. But when you have your priors like we did, T. Higgins wasn't our favorite prospect behind Jefferson and Reagor, but he was still pretty intriguing in his own right. And when he flashed, that was a guy we prioritized. So I will chalk that up for another thing that I thought we did well this year that we hadn't done in previous years.
Yeah, I think we did a much better job. It is kind of funny that we draft wide receivers early and often, and the thing we got better at was drafting more wide receivers. But yeah, I think we did a good job with, or not drafting more wide receivers, but picking them up off the waiver. Like you want to have exposure to upside, and just because you think you have a lot of upside at wide receiver early on does not mean that you should ignore upside that either becomes available later in the draft or becomes available on waivers. And, the Laviska Shenault pick, which is another case of not having any diversification, we just hammered Shenault. But I actually feel pretty good about that. Shenault should have been such a smash. That one just feels like we got the worst possible outcome with the disaster of the Jaguars. But anyway, we were looking for upside later in the draft. And sometimes when you've drafted a bunch of wide receivers early, you're thinking, I need upside for my team. I need upside at the running back position. And you're sort of forcing in running back picks when there might not be an upside pick at running back as much as there is an upside pick at wide receiver. And that's okay. Like, I think you can follow the upside where it actually is. Like, there are right answers here. You're going to turn over the cards and we're going to find out who actually put up a ton of points at the end of the season. You can't just take a player in round 14 at running back because you really need a running back. If the wide receiver's the guy who has the much better profile, you should take that guy. And I think we did a better job of that this year.
Yeah, for sure. We got our buddy Hassan here, and we were talking a little bit about quarterback strategy. He says, do either of you think there's value in going late round QB? I know we liked Dak, Kyler, etc., but there seems to be value in taking a skill position player there and then taking a stab at quarterback. I mean, I feel like this year, when we ended up with a ton of those like premium quarterbacks, right? Like we had a ton of Dak, we had a ton of Kyler, we had some Deshaun Watson. To me, I feel like we were really, and same with Josh Allen on the Crack Rock team, we were letting the drafts come to us, and our boards had dried up. Like there weren't running back.
The Crack Rock team if you can.
Yeah, I'll pull that up here. Let me switch the screens here as this is going. But I feel like that wasn't something we were like going out of our way to prioritize. We never went into a draft being like, we need to have a quarterback in round 6 or 7, but we would look.
We fell into it.
So to me, I'm not making any like bigger rules about that. Like in this first draft, we did go later round QB with Carson Wentz because we liked the skill position players there, and none of the big quarterbacks fell. So I don't know. Is that the cop-out answer to say every draft is unique and independent on it?
Well, Leone and I are talking about for our pod this week. We might just do a big portion of it on this topic because this is like something that it seems like the market is really in flux on, and we're trying to figure out like we wanted to talk through like what's the right answer here because the ADP might shift in a big way. So like for example, I believe it was round 11 in the 2019 draft. We took Kyler Murray as a rookie, and we could have had Lamar Jackson, who went later in that round. It was either round 11 or round 12. I think it was around 11, but that's a big difference from then the following year. If you want one of those quarterbacks, you're taking maybe Kyler in round 7. You get like Dak in the round 6 range or whatever. So a huge jump in ADP for the top quarterbacks. You could still get Josh Allen later than that. And in the Crack Rock team, he fell like really far. I think that might
have it pulled up now. Yeah.
Yeah. Round 11 there. Okay. So, but you see Kyler here in round 7, Dak round 7, Russ round 5. So that round 5 to 7 range was kind of one tier. And then you had some guys, Allen did fall kind of far here, but
I remember that moment during the draft because I remember having the RotoViz FFPC command center thing. And, I generally am just on the running back and wide receiver tab because we had already cranked it purple. So I'm looking at running back and wide receivers. And I think at the last second I tabbed over to QB to see if there were any like extreme values. And I was like, holy shit, Josh Allen is here in the 11th round. And we were all just like unanimous snap pick.
Yeah. Yeah. We should have taken him in round 10 over Chris Herndon.
No, you got to grab Chris Herndon, man.
Yeah,
you got to grab purple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, what might happen this year is that this whole crew, Russ Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, they might all kind of combine with Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes and move up into like the 4-5 range. And I think I think next year is going to be the year where it becomes hard to figure out what to do because taking Kyler Murray in round 7 or, taking the guy who fell a little bit later, who fell maybe into the 6-7 turn or into round 7, that was like an awesome pick. Those picks hit. You were really happy. Our Dak team looked like it could win the whole thing before he went down. We had Christian McCaffrey and obviously injuries ruined that whole team, but you're looking at those picks of quarterbacks in the 6-7 round range, and because they combined rushing and passing, they ended up being awesome picks. So where is the right time to take them? Because obviously Lamar Jackson in the 2nd, and there was a bunch of teams who took Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews on the 2-3 turn. That did not work out. Pat Mahomes in the 3rd, I think is too early. But what is the right spot? I think it's probably somewhere in like the late 4th to like early 6th round range. But if you can find a guy who goes like 4 or 5 rounds after that, you're going to smash.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting. I think, it's going to come down as usual to what running backs do people fall in love with in that 4th, 5th round. obviously it's probably definitely more optimal to take an elite QB in the 4th, 5th round than it is to take fucking Todd Gurley or Melvin Gordon or whatever.
Where do you think Josh Jacobs goes next year?
Josh Jacobs to me feels like a guy that would, I mean, look at this draft. Like David Johnson goes end of round 2. Like I feel like Josh Jacobs still goes into round 2, early 3rd.
Doesn't he? To me, I'm like, why would what about Josh Jacobs says he should definitely go before round 7? He's a round 7 pick. Like there's enough, he doesn't add any value to your team. Anyway, I'm about to go on a rant. But I was looking at him in stat chasing. It's just like, yeah, he's got the starting job in Vegas. Great. But I think there's still going to be a huge advantage. Even though this year was a really nice year for zero running back, I think guys like Josh Jacobs, not even like the Melvin Gordon, obviously, he's kind of like a clear-cut case of, I mean, he was a guy we were avoiding this year where he was going. So there's going to be guys like that. But I think there's going to be guys like Josh Jacobs who are graduating into the running backs to avoid that people won't view as running backs to avoid.
The thing is like the narratives will still work in our favor because people will say, well, you still need these elite running backs to win. Not realizing that they're, drafting guys that have like a 40% chance of actually being an elite running back or even less than that.
40%?
No,
take the 0 off.
No. I'm talking about where they're going at cost. So when people are drafting Miles Sanders at pick 8 or 9, like, okay, maybe he has a 40, 50. And as you go down, those percentages keep dropping, obviously. But I'm just saying people will continue to take cracks at those, just thinking if I do hit on that guy, then I'm cruising, then I'm crushing. And so I think that narrative will always work in our favor, and people will continue to take low probability shots on running backs for that reason.
Yeah. Although I've never quite understood because, like, you see here, Team 5.
You're arguing about like what should happen. We agree on this. I'm telling you what's going to happen.
No, you're
how
right.
People how they talk themselves into these suboptimal picks.
But like, okay, look at Team 9. Team 9 took Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, and Tariq Cohen. He made bets on 3 running backs. Mm-hmm. He was like, these are going to be my running backs that are going to pop. I don't, my thoughts on Fournette have been, well, I've made those clear. But like, that's not, I don't mind that. You bet that Aaron Jones is going to hit. You're like, Fournette's going to be a smash RB1 that I got in round 4. And then you went and filled it out with, points elsewhere in your lineup. That's like, if you're talking yourself, or actually the guy who took Josh Jacobs, he took him in the 2nd round and then didn't take another running back till round 6, came back for a couple more after that. He was like, Josh Jacobs is going to have an amazing running back 1 year. I'm betting that he's going to score 20 points a game. And I'm going to fill in with Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown. How did this guy not win our league? This is a pretty awesome team. But, like, that's the way to bet on one of these running backs that doesn't have the clear-cut profile, I think. Like, you are betting, whether you want to or not, when you take a running back in this range, you're betting that they can score, like, 20 to 22 points a game. That's the only way that pick pays off. And so you should structure your team accordingly. It's kind of like otherwise you're just cannibalizing the upside that you already bet on.
Yeah, and before, I know we referenced that other team, but why we're here with the Crack Rock team, and we've kind of mentioned this before. Obviously, this is a team that is very different from, in some respects, from a team you and I would have drafted on our own, and then in some other respects, structurally is similar. Obviously, you and I weren't taking 2 running backs early in any of our drafts. We would have been hammering wide receivers in this range, although not necessarily these wide receivers. We were on Moore and Diggs. We weren't on Odell and Keenan. And then we probably would have taken a stab at one of these tight ends, most likely Hawkinson, like we did, but would not have grabbed these other tight ends here. So I guess what a conversation I'm pushing us toward is this idea of kind of getting outside of your comfort zone and drafting differently in kind of marrying these hybrid strategies. I think another example might be you see Sean and Blair draft an extremist zero running back strategy, and then you see Sean and Curtis has a little bit more of a preference for some running backs. They end up with some Jonathan Taylor teams, and they had a really successful team that I believe finished 13th in the main event. So what do you think about this idea of trying to like marry up like two different but still structurally sound strategies?
I think it's a great thing to do, and I think co-owning and having different co-owners and like what we've done, on this show, which has been really fun and hopefully fun to watch and everything, is both good for like what we're doing on this podcast or on the show, and actually good for our teams, because you get other people who are really good at this. You kind of bring in some of their views on how to build a team, and you kind of find that middle ground. And the team with Crack Rock, I think, was a great example where like we would not have taken Derrick Henry. We weren't even taking Austin Eckler here, but we found, the two running backs in this range that we were comfortable with. And then we don't take another running back till round 12. So we're kind of still doing a strategy that we feel pretty comfortable with. It's like, it's definitely not the strategy we would have used, but it's not all that different in that we're limiting the amount of capital that we're spending on the running back position. We just spent it too quick up top, then didn't go back to it till round 12. Then the other thing is this cranking purple thing, which is like both hilarious and actually a really interesting strategy. I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because, and Crackrock talked about how he's trying to keep starting points off of other people's rosters. He's looking at like the percentage started, and we got a bunch of guys who would normally start for other teams. You're preventing other teams from starting those guys. You're actually creating the run. You're creating the desire for tight end.
Would you say starving the beast, Pat?
You're starving the beast. But the other thing you're doing is that you've got, I think, there's like a impulse to, or a natural instinct to think that all your picks are going to work out. And when you crank it purple and you take 4 tight ends in a row, you're kind of, it's sort of the opposite of what I was saying with the Josh Jacobs thing. As you progress in the draft, each pick is less and less likely to actually hit. And more so than you think. Like when you're in round like 11, 12, 13, almost none of those picks are really going to do that much. Some of them might, 1 or 2 might have huge seasons, but for the most part, those are really not that valuable to your team that year. And when you take 3, 4 tight ends in a row, you're kind of admitting that in a way. You're like just searching for one guy. You're kind of throwing shit against the wall, which is actually, I think, a pretty decent strategy to try to fill in the important tight end position, which is a little gross every year. It's like gross to really gross every single season. And so I think taking a quantity over quality approach to the tight end position in the rounds before it gets just totally disgusting makes a lot of sense.
And another kind of thing that more crystallized for me this year with, specifically with the cranking purple strategy is because how short the FFPC regular season is and when the ad drops start to lock, like the opportunity cost of carrying multiple players at a position, whether that is a bunch of cranking purples, whether that's a bunch of scratch off running backs, I guess more specifically in the guys that are contributing to your lineup, like the tight ends, you can end up cutting those and keeping them off your opponent's roster for the money weeks, which is another really valuable part of it because you get to almost have your cake and eat it too, where you get the peak and you get the stabs. Hey, maybe one of these guys is a league winner. TJ Hawkinson ended up being the guy for us to emerge. But then it's like we can throw, Jared Cook into the pool and no one's going to start Jared Cook against us or get those points.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we obviously we cut Chris Herndon pretty quickly, but we had Henry, Hawkinson, and Cook the entire season, threw Cook back, and now no one can pick him up. And the season, is short in FFPC. And those weeks where you can, before, I've already forgotten the rules again, Pete. What is it? After week 10, anyone you cut, you can't pick back up?
Yeah.
So, that's not that long. And we threw Jared Cook back, 10 weeks in, and now we're not going to have to deal with Jared Cook facing us. So yeah, I think this cranking purple strategy was like, again, it's hilarious, but also kind of eye opening.
It was, I think, and that's like, I feel like that's applicable to a lot of things. That idea of trying things out, pushing things to the extreme. Bales has talked about this in his newsletter, right? Of like pushing a strategy to the extreme, slowly reeling it back until you find that optimal spot for it. And I feel like this was one of those things of like something you and I would have never have done. And I feel like we have such a better grasp on maybe how to approach mid-round tight ends after going a little extremist here with Crack Rock.
Yeah, yeah. Which, the Chris Herndon pick was the one none of us wanted to make at the time. I remember when we were on the clock, we were like, we don't know who to pick. We like argued about 3 or 4 guys and somehow landed on Herndon. So we got even more extreme than we planned at the time. And yeah, I think better to go 3 than 4 when you're cranking a purple. But I like that we went for it. As our first shot at it. I kind of like it.
And the other thing, you can compare it to our other draft board. And again, we all think we're going to have a high hit rate on these picks. And you're like, oh, well, you took Chris Herndon in round 10. Well, in the other league, that's taking Boston Scott in round 10. Like all of these guys that we think are overconfident on, I guess what I'm trying to say is the opportunity cost of even just whiffing on Chris Herndon there isn't as great as you might think.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Well, that goes to the whole idea of what we're even trying to do here. And I think this is going to be a topic that probably really tilts us come August. And, it's like the closer you actually get to the season, it gets more and more frustrating. But sitting here today, it's easy to talk about, but it's like you're not drafting an actual fantasy team when you draft a fantasy team. You're taking a bunch of shots on guys because like look at who won leagues. It's like you literally needed to have one of Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Alvin Kamara, Mike Evans. Like you needed those guys. Those guys in week 16 put teams over the top. And then there's guys, who kind of got you there. There's a whole Derrick Henry, we know all these guys, Dalvin Cook, but there's not that many of them. And then there's a bunch of dudes who you could kind of have or not have. Like you needed to have some guys who filled in points. But if you had Myles Gaskin, you could have, that was a huge because he was free. James Robinson was huge because he was free. But so many of these guys aren't necessarily putting up the huge week winning points. It's that you were able to either get them really cheap or they're filling in around other studs. And so who gives a shit after the draft if you don't have a running back 2, or if you drafted like 2 unbalanced, or if you only have 1 quarterback and or have a low floor quarterback? Like it just doesn't matter. So much changes, not throughout even the course of the season, but like 3 weeks in, a ton has changed. And just trying to remember, like, I think we think about this stuff already, but even for us, I think it's a good reminder of just trying to remember, like, you're drafting a portfolio of upside plays. You're not really drafting a team.
Yeah. And it is crazy. Like you can go back through like even this Crack Rock team that was, the best team that we've ever had. And there's really just like at cost, like 3 absolute smashes, in Josh Allen, Diggs, and Keenan Allen. Like those were the guys that kind of obliterated their ADP, Hawkinson probably by a couple of rounds, Henry and Eckler, delivered on their cost, but it's just one of those things, like you don't have to get that many things right. Like you really, really don't. And those structures provide kind of a safety net to your failure in nailing every pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Eckler like was potentially a league loser for some teams, I mean, not potentially. I think if you didn't draft the right guys after Eckler, like that was a really rough pick. But to have him, or at least the thought of having him, didn't really work out the way we wanted. But heading into the playoffs, we were so psyched to have Eckler as a potential hammer that we had been able to stash on the bench. Derrick Henry, I mean, that's pretty awesome value at the 10 spot.
And And that is something I want, like another kind of takeaway for me of things I want to be more open to is like when I was drafting, some of my best ball teams, like towards the end there, I was really dialed into schedules. I was looking at stuff late in season, trying to identify, teams that were going to be playing in lots of domes games or, good weather games, like the stuff I could actually know would have an impact on it. And, Derrick Henry's schedule, even way back then, like looked pretty appetizing too. And I think this idea of it works to your same point of like, who cares if you're balanced after the draft? Who cares if you have, like you're ultimately optimizing to try to win first place, the grand prize. Like that's what you're going for. And so I think even going more extreme with building that in mind, I think makes a lot of sense. And I know looking at schedules can be very hard that far out, but I think you need to be open to it because that is ultimately the way you win $500,000.
Yeah. And Derrick Henry, I think, is a good example of just remaining open to stuff because Derrick Henry has like so many red flags for the type of running back that we're looking for. And at the same time, he just absolutely knocks out of the park some of the stuff that we also recognize as important. Like he's got a team that's absolutely committed to him. He's got, the entire offense is basically structured around getting him going. And he's got a ton of touchdown equity. It's not going to happen every week, but there's those weeks where you just go, oh shit, Derrick Henry's going to score 4 touchdowns. We're very familiar with those weeks in DFS. Like it's just, there's not that many guys who have that much touchdown upside. And yeah, he's not going to get there on catching the ball, but that's a rare profile. And we should just, if it pops up again, Derrick Henry, I guess it'll pop up again with him next year. But just, something to keep in mind. Those touchdowns and a team that's built around feeding their workhorse is still pretty rare.
And, again, to kind of just, it's easy to do hindsight bias. It's easy to, Monday morning quarterback. I mean, when we're being honest with ourselves, if we were doing this draft on our own, Pat and I would have taken George Kittle at 10.
Yeah, we would have.
We would have taken him, and that would have been a disaster, not because he was a bad pick, but because he fucking got hurt. And then let's say that George Kittle had already gone, we would have taken Devontae Adams there at 10 instead. And then that would have been an uber smash, and we would have been feeling great about that. So it just goes and shows how fragile some of those decisions are. There were those 3 picks there, Henry, Kittle, Adams. 2 of them were smashes, and 1 of them would have been a disaster. And that's fucking fantasy football.
Yeah, and Kittle, like, if he had stayed healthy, might have been the best. I mean, it's hard to say with Adams, but he would have been an amazing pick if he had stayed healthy. In a tight end premium format, I mean, he you saw him last week. Like, he just, coming off injury, he looks amazing. Like, so that's a big part of it, too, is this injuries are a huge part of the game.
And this is actually, too, and we talk about the diversification, and we had a decent amount of guys we like. I mean, we loved Travis Kelce, but just where we drafted in a ton of our drafts, basically all of our drafts, we never got Travis Kelce. Like we were never in the pocket. We were either getting, Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, or we were pushed back so far that we were having to go in another direction. And to me, that's just another argument of doing a few more drafts, which I know we don't need to be managing more drafts, but it is one of those things where, Travis Kelce was obviously just an absolutely incredible smash pick if you landed on him in the first round. And he's a guy we like, but the pockets just didn't fall to us.
Yeah, I don't really have any regret about not forcing it with Kelce. Great pick. I have, plenty of Kelce in best ball, have him in dynasty and stuff, and it was an awesome pick. But yeah, you can't just like kind of force something that, we would have had to take Kelce over Kamara or, over Cook or something.
Yeah. And I think ultimately too, like, again, it goes back to that diversification thing. Because we knew we kind of were able to get Mark Andrews whenever we wanted in the second, structurally, it was just so much more attractive for us to get that anchor running back for how we wanted to build. And in that first draft, when we get Kamara and then Andrews, it just sets us up to draft exactly how we want. And I remember talking it through where it's like, we found ourselves in previous years. If we don't get that tight end early, you're looking at a Delaney Walker in the 4th round, if I recall correctly, or you're looking at an Arian Foster, Jeremy Hill in the 6th round because you're panicking on running back. I think we've worked through some of those things where we don't panic now and we trust the structure more. But just in general, it is really freeing to nail like the value with the structure. Like when that lines up is a good feeling. And I felt like that happened with us multiple times this year.
I agree. Yeah, it definitely did. And I think one thing to keep in mind is like as ADP changes throughout the course of the offseason, just trying to figure out like different approaches to your structure. And I guess you could also compare this to like building a GPP team. You know, it's like, well, right now the ADP really lines up. You know, I've got a pick at the 104 position. It really lines up to take a running back, go back to wide receiver, get a tight end in the 3rd, whatever. And then maybe, you know, at a different point in the offseason, it's just take the 2 running backs, take Derrick Henry, take Austin Eckler, and then don't go back to running back for a long, long time, because that's kind of the way the ADP is falling. And that's the way to attack the running back position. Like you can get a bunch of upside. I mean, and, you know, even, yeah, sure, in retrospect, but even at the time, like Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler, that's a lot of upside to get at the running back position with your first 2 picks. And then you don't cannibalize it by just hammering running back. You're assuming you've made 2 really good upside picks at the position. You're able to go to the other positions, get Keenan Allen, get Stephon Diggs. So being like open to switching your strategy as the ADP kind of morphs, I think is something to be cognizant of.
Yeah, let's head over to our other main event team here, just as we continue to do our post-mortem on these teams. You know, Pat and I are just kind of talking through it as we go. If you guys have any questions about stuff, let us know. We will pull up this team. It will be painful to look at. The team where we will, you know, forever ask what could have been if this team didn't get bitten by the injury bug. Pat, we did this main event draft, what, maybe a couple weeks before the season?
Yeah, I think this was like 3 weeks before the season. Yeah,
so I'm getting this pulled up here.
Pete, did you notice someone, it's been a while now, but someone, someone said we both have thin lips.
I saw someone said that earlier. Yeah, I mean, I've come to grips with it. I think your lips are fine, Pat, honestly. But
that shook me to my core. I was laughing about Pete's thin lips, and then all of a sudden I found out I had thin lips too, apparently. So,
well, someone told me that it's a notorious kind of just white boy problem in general. So, you know, maybe it's just, but apparently I'm on the extreme end of it. But yeah. Let's see.
Thank you for putting me full screen for that, so people could really get a sense of my lips.
I actually do want to do this because Josh had emailed me or DM'd me about this. So he's putting together a playoff fundraiser. Donate $10 to Alexandria House, a women's shelter in LA, for 3 entries into my raffle. I'll be raffling off 4 gauntlet entries on Underdog. DM me if you donate. So yeah. Josh, let us know any other information that you want to have us pass along, and send me the tweet again on Twitter, and I will share that for people as well. But Josh is a good dude and has a good cause going here, and I believe I need to check it out. But the Gauntlet is a playoff best ball tournament that Underdog is running, which is pretty cool. So I will have to hop in those streets here. I believe they're already drafting with week 17 here. Still left to go, but I will probably jump in those Underdog streets next week as well.
That's interesting. I will too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, back to this team here.
Sorry, this guy Liam has been commenting on the lips. Also thinks you should have never dropped Mans and could have been up to 1 million views.
A billion views, yeah. The Crypto Man's YouTube channel that would get in the upwards of 80 to 90 views a video. Begs to differ, but I appreciate you saying that. All right, so this was the team where we obviously started with Christian McCaffrey, and we took Mark Andrews in the second because we couldn't stomach the idea of taking running backs in back-to-back rounds. So we did punt Aaron Jones to 3.1 instead of 212.
Well, we
And
would have we almost took DJ Moore,
we did.
and yeah, and like that would have been, I guess, a worse pick, but also I feel like it ultimately at one point we were like, thank God we took Aaron Jones, but it wasn't as much of a difference as we thought at one point.
Yeah. And then man, the this one, it wasn't a decision between Cortland Sutton and Metcalf. We got both of them. And then we set up our Dak double stack here, which we were very excited about. We had another classic passing on Justin Jefferson for Jalen Reagor, but we did hit on Brandon Ayuk here in a way that kind of masked that. And then some other whiffs to round this out. But man, this team was absolutely cooking the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, if we could have gotten a healthy season out of Dak, McCaffrey, I mean, this team really could have been something. But this is actually what I was talking about, like exactly what I was talking about earlier in the show about Reagor versus Jefferson. We'd already gotten Reagor at a cheaper cost than this, and at this point, I believe maybe we already had the shoulder. I can't remember if the shoulder issue had cropped up yet or not. But we could have diversified off of Reagor here with the idea that we could get Jefferson on the 10-11 turn, which he would have been there. So those types of decisions, which at the time feel like really difficult, at least for me, like that's really difficult because you're like, yes, we have Jalen Reagor, but we don't have him with Dak and McCaffrey. Now we can pair up this league winner with these other league winners, and it's like tough to make yourself diversify. But you look at it in retrospect, you're like, dude, you paid a higher cost for a player who you already had exposure to and may already have a red flag crop up versus a guy you also really liked, who you could have gotten a full round later and gotten exposure to. As I'm looking at this other round, there's no one else here that I wish we drafted. I guess let's say Noah Fant or something. You could have put Noah Fant on this team.
Yeah. And I do think though this was another example of how we kind of shifted our strategy on the fly, where in taking Aaron Jones, you see we don't take another running back until round 10. We add in a few more wide receivers in the middle rounds than we would normally draft, and I felt good too about how we approached that with both Cowboys wide receivers making some really big bets on that offense. And if McCaffrey stays healthy and Dak stays healthy, I mean, this team I feel pretty confident is a top 50 main event team. Although I'm sure lots of teams could say that if my guys stayed healthy, if my Kittle teams, if whatever. But this team was set up to crush before the injuries.
It was. I mean, Dak, Gallup, McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, like. There was a lot here. Of course, Cortland Sutton, it's the injuries are going to kill you, but this team was fun to draft, and we had like a really fun 4 weeks with it.
Yeah, it was. I'm trying to think of any other takeaways here. I mean, obviously the Aaron Jones pick was the one that was different for us, but I think it went to us being adaptable there. And a guy, one of the things, granted, we did this draft, I think, before we did the Crack Rock draft, but Dan Masterson was in the chat earlier talking about, how Crack Rock is always looking for those ADP values. And we don't generally prioritize that, but this Aaron Jones one stood out in such a big way to us. And then Aaron Jones wasn't a Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake type, right? Where we were worried about his pass catching role. Like we had faith in the Aaron Jones talent, in the profile that he would catch some passes. So he checked. It was like the perfect storm for us to draft a running back in the early third.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron Jones has an Alvin Kamara type of profile where he gets really high value touches per snap. And the whole concern with him was A.J. Dillon had just been drafted in the second round. And, that basically turned out not to be anything to worry about. Hurt him a little bit last week, but that wasn't anything to worry about for the vast majority of the season. So we didn't if David Johnson had been here instead of Aaron Jones, we're insta passing, right? It's that a guy with a profile that you could argue belonged more around Eckler here, who went at the 202. ended up falling to the 212. So while I'm a little skeptical of just kind of taking a bunch of ADP values, like I sometimes feel like that can discombobulate a structural strategy. You do want to be at least open to it.
Yeah, this is actually a good point too from Mookie about Aaron Jones. Rodgers was the real Aaron Jones killer this year. Once he had his eyes set on these records and the passing touchdowns, I mean, just think like if you give Aaron Jones just a few more of those, goal line looks that Adams would get peppered with, I mean, Aaron Jones is just a mega like top 5 RB smash.
Yeah.
So yeah, we didn't account for Aaron Rodgers going, full YOLO, calling his own plays there and feeding Devontae Adams. Any other takeaways on this team?
Not really. I think just every time I see Diggs, I'm just can't believe he lasted that long. And it's, he's always in the same 5th, 6th round range, but he just is just an unreal value.
Every one of my teams that like really made a splash, the team that finished 5th in the bubble championship, the team that won the Draft Sharks Invitational, our team with Crack Rock, everyone has Diggs on it. I mean, Diggs was like that difference maker this year for teams. And when you went through, those top 10 teams in the bubble final, like I could barely even move up because everyone had Diggs. Like if you made it that far, I mean, you had Diggs on your team.
Yeah. Just such a smash.
Yeah. Let's see here. But yeah, so I think overall, we talked a little bit last week as far as stuff we want to do differently going forward. I mean, I really do want to do more main events next year, as many as possible compared to the Football Guys ones. I really want to be able to get rewarded for kind of the season long play. So even if that means, taking on a little bit more of a liability financially, relative to the price points, it's been hard to stomach kind of the payout structures and how that works in the Football Guys contest.
Yeah, I like the main event a lot better than Football Guys. The getting some regular season reward, in the main event team that we talked about first, like we drafted, the team we drafted first finished first in points, barely did not also finish first in record. And then we lost in the championship round. In a Football Guys team, we don't make any money on that team, So I guess we make the second place prize, but it's like, we don't get any regular season money on that team.
Do you know what it actually is if we do a Football Guys team, like we should do like really extremist draft strategies, like the round 10 plus 0 RB teams, like just completely optimizing a team for week 14 through 16 schedule. Like if you're not taking a shot to get first place in that, and I know everyone says they are like, yeah, my goal is to get first place, but I promise you look at these rosters, that's not what they're doing. I mean, you have to be gunning for first place in that contest.
You do. Well, we should see if we can get the guy who won back-to-back on.
Yeah. And what else was I going to say about things to do different? Oh, I wanted to mention, because I saw Eric Belair was in there mentioning, maybe wanting to get into the mid-stakes stuff. And we will, Pat and I are clearly big fans of co-managing and stuff. So I'm sure we can help play matchmaker a little bit with ship chasing listeners. I'm sure there's a few of you guys who could get together and manage a team and have a lot of success, help offset the cost of, a full main event team, which does get very pricey fast. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, we'd be happy to help coordinate that in the off season and find people who would be good co-managers together.
Yeah, because we talked about this on recently too, but I do think there's an advantage to dipping your feet in like a little bit more than you might think, like going into a main event team and kind of skipping the Football Guys, especially if you're able to do it with a co-manager, because then you get your focus really on that team and you're like kind of rapidly learning because you're just like putting in so much of your own mental effort into the decisions that you're making for that team. And you've got someone who's also the exact same way. And so you can kind of have what Pete and I are doing. Like debriefing about the teams, thinking about what you want to do differently, and you'll kind of level yourself up more quickly, I think, than if you just kind of dabble with some teams you feel more comfortable on.
Dude, this is such a good idea. And this is honestly something I had started batting around in my head, but hadn't like thought about it. But maybe do some co-drafts as live streams, but the managers have the skin in the game and manage throughout the year. Because to me, like Pat and I absolutely love doing the live streams. And we want to do a bunch of them. But the managing workload is beyond unreasonable for us in season. So if we could work out something like that where, we have Eric Belair on, or, we do the drafts and then we kind of give the keys, to Eric, to help manage that team during the season. Like something like that is something I've been batting around that would allow us to do more drafts, but not have to manage them all ourselves.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I would definitely do that.
Yeah, so that we'll definitely continue to
we could have Eric. I would only do that with Eric specifically if he comes on week 1 with no prep and stressfully puts in his waiver. So we get the reverse of what we did week 1.
Yeah. So we'll figure out kind of some system for that, whether that is. But if you guys are interested in that, obviously we're a little ways out. But having teams that we draft and then, that you guys are partners with and help then take the reins co-managing, we'll figure that out. I think that could be a good way for us all to have the draft experiences that we want.
Yeah. Nick saying drafting and not managing, that's like having sex, but not having to take the girl out to dinner. Yeah, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I imagine we would check in and see what was going on with these teams from time to time. Yeah,
no, it's it's like having sex, but then still checking in with them and asking them how much they like the sex every week after it in perpetuity.
Which everyone likes.
Yeah, so you got to workshop that analogy just a little bit, Nick. See, Frank, absolute crusher, multiple teams in the top 100 of the main event. He's down to do where. See, we got people here. We got people.
Well, I mean, Crack Rock's got his emerging business of waiver wire interns, so maybe that'll solve everyone's problems.
Yeah. Liam cannot stop talking about mans. I feel like I should do a private. Liam, how much would you pay for a one-on-one live stream with mans? Because I have a lot of time opening up.
So, Pete, I believe you just offered to do an OnlyFans for
you mean OnlyMans?
OnlyMans.
How did he, dude? He would have been all over that, man.
Onlymans.com.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're on the Crack Rock program. We're just we're recruiting. It's nothing sexual. It's all for college credit.
I'm still on OnlyMans. That's too good.
Man. Do we have anything else, Pat? We're losing steam here.
Yeah, I don't know, man. We could get into the football guys teams if you want, but
I don't know if I have the stomach for this. I mean, the team with Hassan and Blair, that one was that was such a bummer because you see the two sides of that coin, right? Like Blair and Sean had a true zero RB team that crushed this year. I mean, literally with just like Naheem Hines and JD McKissick at running back. And that could have been us, except every single wide receiver we drafted was hurt. Kittle, Galladay, we lost AJ Brown for portions. I mean, Julio, we lost for it was one of those teams where we found our way on all the zero RB landmines. But yeah, I am unfazed with zero RB, happy to go back to the well. If anything, I want to do more like that. And I do think the football guys contest actually lends itself to it, where I was just talking about going extreme, trying to give yourself a chance to win first place there.
For sure, especially if you've got the later draft spot. If you're drafting top 3, top 4, you don't got to force that. But yeah, if you're drafting, you have to take what, the opportunities that you got, you got to make the most of those. So if you're drafting out of the 12 hole, you're competing with people who got the opportunity to take the best running backs. So it makes sense to pivot off of it.
This question, we've talked about this. Do you regret Derrick Henry takes? No, because to land on Derrick Henry, you also had to be drafting Kenyon Drake and Joe Mixon and all of those guys there. I mean, unless you just were David Kitchen and had a singular focus on Derrick Henry, if you're drafting running backs with that kind of profile, there are a ton of landmines, and Derrick Henry happened not to be that landmine this year.
I do regret it a little bit. I think we see, last year in the playoffs, we saw them go through New England and then go through Baltimore, riding Derrick Henry, and he was the engine of their offense. And it's an unconventional profile for what we're looking at for an early round fantasy, or a top 5 type of fantasy running back. But the touchdown equity, as I talked about earlier, is just so massive. And he's like a 250-pound running back. Like, there is something different about him. And the team is not just committed to using him, but their entire passing game is like a play-action passing game. So there is a little bit different to like taking him versus Josh Jacobs, where the team does not seem at all concerned with making sure Josh Jacobs gets his touches, or Kenyon Drake, which was a total wild card, or, those other guys going a little bit after him. I think in retrospect, I do regret putting him in that tier with those guys. I think he was a better pick than those selections.
Yeah. I mean, it's still tough because I'm just trying to find how, we're like we showed in that draft. Like, I wasn't going to take Henry over Kittle there.
Yeah.
And if you are deciding between like Kelsey and Henry, Kelsey's a smash. If you're deciding between Henry and Devontae Adams, Adams is a smash. Like, it's, I get it. I just don't think the way we build and the way we go after people, like without a crack rock being like, we're taking Derrick Henry here, I don't think we end up with a lot of him this year.
No, yeah. I mean, but like, he was also coming off a season akin to what, Dalvin Cook was. So I think we overthought putting him in a lower tier than he deserved based on what he had done the previous year and what he was set up to do this year.
I also, one thing too, and I get that his role is pretty secure, but I do think he had a nice run out with the Darrington Evans injury. I mean, based on what they were saying about Darrington Evans at camp, it seemed like they had some pretty big plans for him in the pass game role that I think could have squeezed his touches a little more than it did. And even we saw at spells there where they were giving Foreman and McNichols a decent amount of work. Obviously, when all the chips were on the line in the fantasy playoffs, it was the big dog and only the big dog. But I think it could have been more of a rough regular season for Henry if Darrington Evans was healthy.
I think that's fair. And I mean, even with all the things Derrick Henry did, he still averaged just below 19 or just below 20 points per game so far. Although he could obviously smash this week, but through the weeks that matter, just under 20 points per game. But he was at 20 points per game in 2019, and back to back. I believe RB3 seasons back to back. So
yeah.
Technically RB5 last year, but he finished in points per game above the guys ahead of him, other than McCaffrey in 2019.
And again, like I know I'm pointing out all the flaws. I mean, I think Henry was obviously a good pick at where he went relative to the production but you also saw the risks of his kind of profile in week 16, where they got behind and the offense isn't cooking and he's not getting check down passes. He's not padding his stats. What did he end up with? Like 8 or 9 points in week 16. Like, he killed teams. You made it to the finals because of Derrick Henry, but you were not. And I know you can cherry pick examples for lots of players like that, but I just do want to point out, like, the risks are still, prevalent in his profile.
Yeah. And I feel like if anything, we should be more on the offensive here, where the clear pick this season was a wide receiver, was Devontae Adams. I mean, Devontae Adams is going to finish with the most points per game of any player at any position in FFPC scoring through 16 weeks. He has 26.4 points per game. That best Alvin Kamara, who has 25.2, at best Travis Kelce, who has 24.3. I'm obviously excluding quarterback.
Yeah.
But you could get the top scoring flex eligible player at the end of the first round, the 112, if you were willing to draft a wide receiver and not chase running back.
Yep. Dan was asking us, you guys planning Vegas or still TBD? Yeah, I mean, we haven't put anything firm. I mean, we definitely, want to do something live next year. We'd floated the idea of maybe something with Kentucky. Obviously, we always enjoy seeing our friends at the FFPC in Vegas. I mean, no matter what, vaccine, COVID permitting, all that stuff, like we want to do something and get out there, have a big ship chasing reunion somewhere. I think would be an absolute blast during draft season. Yeah,
I mean, let's roll out this vaccine already. Let's get us back out to Vegas. I'm down.
Yeah. So we'll figure it out, guys. It is, we will be chomping at the bit. I mean, the dream is to do a ton of drafts online early in the off season, and then get together in August for some live stuff. Would be absolutely awesome. So we will, of course, keep you guys posted on any plans, developments with that. And I think, we haven't talked a ton about it, but I think our plan is to have more of an off-season presence on the channel this year than we have in years past, where we've been way more seasonal. I know you have some dynasty stuff that you want to do, and I think we want to go more year round with this channel, right?
Yeah, we do. We're still figuring out the details, but we do.
Yep. So that is that's the deal, guys. Like I mentioned earlier, we have playoff week next week, so going to be doing lots of stuff on that. We haven't hammered out the exact details. I think what the plan will be, Pat, my hope would be we do our typical Wednesday show, and then we do a special like Friday evening show similar to what we did last year with Dink and Leone, where it's kind of last minute. This is ownership talking through kind of all the final stuff before contest lock on Saturday, if you're up for that.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. The FFPC Playoff Challenge is one of my favorite parts of the year.
Yeah, it is. I have so much fun doing it every year, and Pat goes in the lab, comes up with ownership projections, which have been very spot on the past years, and it really provides a roadmap. Like, you think of chalk condensing on like a big DFS slate. I mean, the FFPC Playoff Challenge is like that on steroids, which it allows you really obvious, sharp leverage points. So I'm excited.
Devontae Adams, man, he's gonna be like 90% owned.
Yeah. In the FFPC contest, lots of dupes, honestly. And if not like a full, whatever it is, 9 roster spots, like 9v9, like there's lots of like 7v7 like dupes, people playing 2v2s, because the optimal roster does become so painfully obvious. So if you're willing,
this year's interesting because there are 2 additional playoff teams, they've added 2 additional flex spots. So there's, maximum flexibility for how you're handling those 2 additional teams. It should bring down dupes a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So yeah, next week will be FFPC Playoff Challenge week. Maybe we'll do some underdog gauntlet best ball stuff as well. We'll figure that out, but we're going to be definitely talking all the playoff contest stuff. Guys, I think we're like 50 subs away from 1,000. Let me pull this up right now. I mean, this is absurd. Get us to 1,000, guys. We're at 950. Yeah, we're exactly 50 people. Pat, I mean, I've done everything I can. Tell these people to subscribe.
Do we need to do some giveaways for the FFPC Playoff Challenge? I think that might be our move.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost too attainable of a goal to give someone what should we give if once we hit? See this, Pat, as someone who has just done this, let me tell you, these contests are logistical nightmares that involve lots of administrative work. So I'm being careful with what I promise here.
All right.
But please get us to 2 subs. I was thinking of something like where we could give people a stake in one of our teams or something like that.
Nick says everyone here is subbed. I did check our numbers, and like a third of the people who watch our channel are not subbed.
Yeah,
so it's way higher than I would have thought.
Yeah, it is actually, it's very surprising when you look at those analytics. I do agree with in the live, people chatting live is probably close to like 95%, but you would be shocked at the overall people who watch. It's generally less than 50% that are subbed. So yes, you freeloaders lurking, subscribe to the channel. Anything else, Pat?
I think that's it.
All right, guys, we appreciate you. We love you. We wish the best for you. And when we see you next, Pat, it will be 2021.
Wow.
Just wow. What if we just sat here and marveled at the number changing on the calendar?
What if we sat here and marveled until it happened?
Wow. It really would. It'd be 25 and a half hours.
It's just got to go about our business and just come back and go, wow.
It'd be really incredible because my wife invited my in-laws over to our place for New Year's Eve tomorrow. So they'd just be over there, drinking Mai Tais, and they'd be like, "What's Pete doing in there?" And he's just like, "Wow."
He can't believe it.
Wow. It's almost 2021. Wow. And then they would think I'm just as weird as they already think I am. All right, guys. For Pat Kerrane, for the Ship Chasing fam, I'm Peter Overzet. We'll see you in 2021. Wow.